Medical professionals of Reddit, what's the most obvious case of faking it you've witnessed? I commonly have young kids who really want glasses because some of their friends have them. They'll come in acting like they can barely see the big E on the chart. I change some lenses in front of their eyes, give them a little encouragement that they can see better, and they can magically read 20/20 with little to no prescription. They're not big fans when I tell them they don't really need glasses. My friend did the opposite. Her school offered eye exams, and she'd make sure to be at the back of the line and just recite from memory the letters the other kids had said. She was afraid her parents would be mad if they knew she needed glasses. We have a patient at our primary care clinic who claims to be blind. He always comes in with sunglasses and a white cane. We were always suspicious, though. Something definitely seemed off. One day, someone followed him out of the building. He walked through our nearly empty parking lot and down the street a little ways to a car parked out of view of the clinic. He folded up his cane, got into the driver's seat, merged into traffic, and drove away. Called to a bar for a seizure. Waitress says she delivered his bill and he suddenly went to the floor having a seizure. Look over at him and he's laying there flopping his arms and legs around as he looks us right in the eye and screams over and over, "I'm having a seizure." We tell him to stand up so we can take him to the ambulance. He does and starts walking to the door. We tell him to hold up, gotta pay your bill first. Man, was he mad at us. Waitress tells us he does this all the time. Well, not today. He still took a ride to the hospital, though. The hospital has good egg salad sandwiches. Not quite the same thing, but in the ER. A woman came claiming she was in labor and got on her way to L&D. L&D sent her back saying she was faking it and needed to go to the psych ward. Quick physical exam showed that was false because the baby was crowning. Sent her back to L&D, and from what we heard, baby was delivered in the hall on the way there. My mom had a patient who said she had passed kidney stones at home and needed painkillers. The lady actually brought in the kidney stones as proof. Patients don't usually do this, and the stones were way bigger than people can pass on their own. My mom sent them to the lab, and they came back as geological origin, aka crazy lady picked up small stones from outside to try and get meds. I can see some first year calling urology like, "Guys, you're not going to believe this. This lady has volcanic kidney stones." Veterinarian here for something different. Performed a cruciate repair on a miniature poodle, and of course the dog limped post-op. Came in for radiographs a month later to confirm healing, looked great, but dog was still limping. 2 months later, the owner was furious that the surgery was a waste of $1,000, threatened to sue. But on examination and re-radiographing the leg, I couldn't find a thing wrong. On a hunch, I asked the owner to leave the dog with me for additional tests that would be of no cost to her, so she went shopping for an hour. During that time, I set up a video camera to record the dog in the kennel run. The moment the dog didn't hear the owner or the car anymore, boom, all 4 legs working like a charm, dog running around perfectly normal. Called the owner and asked her to return after half an hour, set the camera to record again, and the moment the dog heard the familiar car returning, the limp came back as well. I had a fun few minutes explaining to the owner that the dog was faking the sore leg for attention. Got the usual, "Oh no, my fur baby Schnooky Wookums wouldn't do such a thing." So I showed her the footage, clearly showing her dog running around fine as well as showing what happened when her car returned. Instructed her to ignore the dog while it was limping. Limp magically went away after a week of not getting attention for it. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. I had a woman come into triage in labor and delivery. We ruled her out for breaking her water. She was mad that she wasn't going to get induced and be delivered. So after I left the room, she flooded the bed, the floor, and herself with tap water. Literally gallons and gallons of water. It was leaking out from under the door. So much water. It was like that scene in Coneheads. She said it was her water breaking. Again, quickly ruled her out and told her she needed to go home. She subsequently peed the bed before leaving. When I wanted to be a physical therapist, I volunteered at one of my local clinics. We had a lady who claimed she was in excruciating pain. She couldn't walk more than 5 feet without literally screaming in pain in the clinic. She couldn't even move her toes without yelling profanities. She kept talking about how her meds ran out and needed more. She also started talking about how her whole family thought she was an addict, but she swore she wasn't. I started feeling for her a little. She seemed nice and she was going through some mess. But then, once the doctor walked out of the room, her and I got to talking about music. I told her my uncle was in a bluegrass band, and she mentioned how much she loved bluegrass. She loved it so much that the prior weekend, her and her husband spent 14 hours at a festival. She was tired, was carrying chairs around and dancing, and they were traveling to go to another one the day after her appointment. When I asked her if she had any pain during the festival, she said, "Oh, none at all. It was a fantastic weekend." And then realized she gave herself up and got real quiet. When they told me they were allergic to Tylenol, acetaminophen, but Vicodin works really well for them. My mom had a frequent flyer at the emergency room she worked at. This lady was constantly in unimaginable pain over everything. She got a splinter in her finger, and that constituted a 10 on the pain scale, and she needed painkillers to deal with it. She was a known drug abuser as well. She had been caught stealing needles and shoving them up under her huge sweaty boobs. The only reason my mom found out was because she came back in to place the EKG pads. And to do so, she had to lift her boob up to place the pad. When she did, the needles rolled out. From that point on, they had to have a member of security watching her anytime a nurse or doctor left the room. She also had a massive arrest record, and there were times the cops would bring her to the ER instead of an ambulance. Not a medical professional, but worked security in an ER. Once had a guy come in, announced that he was going to have a seizure, then laid down slowly and comfortably on the floor and didn't start seizing until he was sure everyone was looking at him. Then, when the nurse, who knew he was obviously faking, said they were going to have to run a tube down his throat, he was suddenly fine. A surprising number of people try to fake being unconscious, but there's a simple test for that. Pick up their hand and drop it onto their face. If they smack their own face, they're unconscious. If they move their hand to the side as it drops, they're conscious. I just brush my finger across the eyelashes. They will flinch their eyes if conscious. Pediatrician here, so my patient was younger, and I think influenced by mom. This 13-year-old kept getting admitted for complaints that never made sense. Lack of smell, dizziness, seizures that would happen while he was walking/running, heart felt hot, etc. Every specialist under the sun had seen him and cleared him. He had every test and imaging study you could think of. There was a lot of social stuff going on, and this was a hard family to discharge. He'd get admitted, we'd run 100 tests, and as soon as we were about to discharge him, some new symptom would come up. The worst thing was, once after I'd already written the discharge orders and the nurse called to let me know the patient had gone blind. I was grouchy that day and wasn't having it. I went in with a rolled-up piece of paper. I checked his pupils, I used a Snellen, I went through the whole rigmarole. Then, when I was talking to his mother, without looking, I threw the paper at him hard and fast. He yelped and dodged it. I told Mom that they were going home. So this happened a few months ago on my psychiatry rotation in med school. There was a patient at an inpatient psychiatric facility for suicidal ideation. She constantly insisted that she had a mass on her breasts and demanded to be physically examined only by male doctors. When the psychiatrist I was rotating under declined to perform a physical exam, she asked me to do it during my daily patient interview. I also declined physical exam, but had a bit of a hunch to check her medical records. It turned out she had an ultrasound done a week before that found only normal breast tissue without masses. However, apparently this lady had frequented many doctors' offices with various complaints of an unspecific nature and would usually focus on breasts or vaginal complaints when she visited male physicians' offices. We diagnosed her with factitious disorder, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome, and histrionic personality disorder. It seems her goal was mostly attention from medical professionals. She had a lot of issues. But we also had to be careful to make sure she wasn't fishing for a lawsuit. Patients like her are why doctors document everything meticulously. Dude had severe and permanent back pain. He was prescribed Vicodin, and he mysteriously ran out halfway through the month consistently. Obviously, dude is taking extra, right? He's acting clueless and is beside himself when we tell him our suspicions. Through this entire time, his wife is his biggest advocate, even when he says, "I don't really need it, I'll survive." His wife is having none of it. She is his biggest support. Ultimately, we decide to take away the Vicodin, and his wife immediately thunders, "I need my frickin' Vicodin!" "Oh, yours, huh?" She sold herself out. I had a patient who was supposedly comatose but was giving a few mixed signs when it came to making a definitive judgment. There's a test called a drop arm test where you raise the patient's arm over their head and drop it. A non-comatose patient will move their arm on their own to avoid hitting themselves in the face. But I had a different idea. With the nurse in the room, I said, okay, our defining test. If his arm stays straight up unassisted, he is comatose. I let go of his arm and it stayed totally upright. The guy did himself in. I told him shortly after that the gig was up and he had no medical reason to be admitted. He was raising his hand for permission to come out of the coma. Duh! My grandma used to work with a lady at a hospital, funny enough, that would always say she got an on-the-job injury and needed to take a few weeks workman's comp. A doctor there would somehow always give her a note and she would get a free week or two vacation, come back for a month, and do it again, obviously milking the system. One day her boss said, okay, but there's nothing for you to do here on light duty. Usually we'd send you home until you're better, but we're going to have you come in until you're better. But there's nothing for me to do, she said. He told her, I know, bring a magazine or something. It'll be a long day sitting in the break room. She lasted 2 days and never pulled that stunt again. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.